And we're live. It is Friday, December 6th, the year of our Lord 2024. And we're going to put the Lord in the year of our Lord today. 8:00 a.m. Washington, D.C. time. We're here with special guest Shane Harris. The sun is shining. The birds are chirping. It is going to be a great fucking day. And you are watching Dog Shirt TV, which is a revolution in morning television. We got a heck of a show for you today. We've got a special with Shane that we're going to turn to in a moment. We are also going to have a live reading of Kash Patel's children's books. Sorry guys, I just banged the microphone. I want you guys to decide, the Greek chorus / collegium can discuss which one we should read. This is the OG, The Plot Against the King. It's the one that's gotten the most attention, but it's also the one that's most grounded in fact, in that the Steele dossier was actually flawed. And so there's a element of truth to it. This one is the one that is a paean to Dinesh D'Souza for work for which D'Souza has so far apologized. The Plot Against the King 2,000 Mules. Get it? And this one is the one about the weaponization of a dragon named DOJ, The Plot Against the King 3, The Return of the King. So while we are talking to Shane, you guys discuss among yourselves. And also, by the way, I have now found a magic new feature on Riverside that allows me to magic cool comments from the Greek chorus up onto the screen. So if you say something particularly witty, I may use it. If you don't like that, just change your name to remove your last name, and then your privacy will be protected. In the meantime, Shane.
Hi.
You have written as your farewell story in the Washington Post. And first of all, I guess you have a new job. We should congratulate you.
Thank you.
Shane is now, tell us about your new role.
Well, so now I am a staff writer at The Atlantic, oldest continuously published magazine in America. And
are you going to write letters from the Birmingham jail?
I'm just going to write everything. I'm going to write everything. I will not be wearing a dog shirt, but I will do a lot of writing. Yes. Why did I think that you might not actually wear it?
I mean, come on. Sure. If you can't wear a dog shirt on Dog Shirt TV.
This might be the one place where I'm going to allow you, I'm going to give to you, like, it's okay for you to wear it. Every other circumstance is not okay. But anyway, I will not be writing any peons to dog shirts of The Atlantic, but I will be writing about my usual beat of intelligence and national security, both long stories for the magazine and online, and shorter pieces as well. So I'm like 6 weeks in, and I've got a story I'm supposed to file today. There'll be a long profile coming out next week of John Ratcliffe, the soon-to-be CIA director.
Well, excellent. Well, welcome. And I would say we're going to talk turkey, except what we're actually going to talk is bacon. For your swan song at the Washington Post, you wrote or recorded this incredible podcast, which I really cannot strongly enough urge everyone to listen to, because if you ever want to understand the way Washington used to work, this is, among other things, I hear that there is like the best bacon recipe in the world in it, but that I cannot personally attest to. But I'm going to play you the opening of this story. and then we're going to have a little conversation about it because this story made me super happy.
So we are taking a break from the news today to bring you a different kind of story. This is a little culinary mystery that I've been chewing on for a long time.
Get it? Chewing
and
on?
I hope that you enjoy it as you are preparing for your Thanksgiving dinner, or maybe you're traveling to and from your holiday gatherings. This is a story about a sweet, meaty treat that has been at the center of American power for decades. It's about politics, loyalty, and finally giving credit where credit is due. From the newsroom of the Washington Post, this is Post Reports. It's Wednesday, November 27th. My name is Shane Harris. I'm now a staff writer at The Atlantic. But in October, I wrapped up 7 years as a national security reporter for the Washington Post. And in that job, I covered the intelligence community, especially the CIA. And over the years, my colleague Ted Muldoon on the Post Audio team would always ask me this one question.
Okay, Shane, so if you had all the time in the world to report on one thing that's been like burning a hole in the back of your reporter's notebook, what would it be?
And the answer was always the same. So, this episode has become the last story that I worked on at the Washington Post. The mystery that I never had time to get to the bottom of. A top secret recipe for candied bacon. I mean, just saying it sounds so serious.
It's real good.
All right. There you go. It is, I gotta say, the most Goyish story ever. I'm not sure I knew you had it in you. Like, Lenny Bruce is like on the list of Jewish and Goyish. This is like so far out. It is a story about old WASP Washington culture and their secret recipes.
Yes.
Tell us about the bacon.
So
how you discovered the bacon.
Yes. So
by the way, the main character, or one of the main characters in this story, has a nickname Vanjie because her name is Evangeline.
Correct.
I mean,
Correct.
like, that's Jews don't have that.
No, I mean, like, I'm a WASP, and this is like beyond anything that I was ever accustomed to in my Episcopal upbringing. But no, so the story of the bacon actually begins with a death. About 10 years ago, Ben Bradley, who was the legendary executive editor of the Washington Post. If you've
Remind me to tell my Ben Bradley story from before we wrap today.
There are many.
Mine is adorable.
Okay, good. I'm glad. It's a family show. So Ben, if you saw the movie All the President's Men, Ben is Jason Robards. So, steered the paper through its most storied periods of, Watergate and, other great stories. Anyway, so Ben died, and there was a funeral which was widely attended by all the sort of glittering people of Washington. But then there was an after party, which was even more exclusive at the home of
May
Ben.
all our funerals have after parties.
Exactly.
I just want to say, like...
Yeah, the real
that is, again, that was one of the first moments in this story where I was like, this is a different world than I live in. Because I've never been to a funeral with an after party.
I mean, you must have remembered this, though. Like, it was a thing in Washington.
Oh, I was not exclusive enough to be invited to the funeral, let alone to the after party.
Yeah, to be clear, I was not invited either. So this was at Ben and Sally Quinn's house. Sally Quinn was his wife, and Ben and Sally were... really like through like the 70s, but especially like the 80s into the 90s, they were sort of this like kind of like an it couple of Washington, and they would throw these huge parties, and they got together government officials and journalists and whatever. And there was sort of like Ben and Sally threw parties. So Sally was throwing Ben one last hurrah, and I was at the time a staff writer, senior writer at Washingtonian magazine. And I'm reading the Reliable Source column written by Roxanne Roberts about the after party. And she's kind of like traveling around the room. It's actually a big tent in the backyard. And she's talking about all the people who were there and, and reminiscing about stories about Ben. And then she has like 14 paragraphs down. She has what they served. And it says something like, oh, and they passed around shrimp cocktail, ham and biscuits, chocolate brownies, and bacon. And that's all it said, and bacon. And I'm like, wait, like, are we talking like a
Random strips of
yeah,
bacon.
like strips of it is on a stick? Is it like in a buffet in a chafing dish? Like, what do you mean bacon? And it was clearly written in this way, this very knowing way, that if you didn't know, you didn't know, right? So,
Which, by the way, no offense to Roxanne Roberts, but she shouldn't have done that.
no, but she
Right.
should have. See, because it never would have caught my attention had she not.
I mean, she should have said like the famous, bacon of like. But there's something of like it's just a weird thing
It's a weird thing.
to write it in, and if you know, you know.
Yes, but in that crowd, I think, as I'll explain, it kind of it worked. And so I'm very confused by this. So I go across the hall to my friend Carol Joint, who I work with at Washingtonian at the time, is a dear friend of mine. And Carol is sort of my trail guide to all things social Washington. She for years wrote a column called Washington Social Diary, where she was invited to all of these parties to kind of write them up, and I would often go with her. And she, she would say, she would approach the party beat like it was the police beat. I mean, she had this just great way of writing about it.
Carol Joint is one of the most fun people in Washington.
She's amazing. She's just incredible, and deserving of a profile in her own right. And so I go to her. I said, Carol, what is this with bacon? And she goes, oh, you don't know about bacon. I'm like, tell me more. And so it turns out that bacon is a reference to candied bacon that you would serve as a cocktail appetizer. So at a big party like the ones that Sally would throw or other people, they would pass around candied bacon as this thing to munch on while you're having a cocktail. And it goes beautifully with cocktails, and it's kind of salty and it's sweet, so it encourages you to drink more. So it gets everybody good and loosened up at the beginning of the party. And I said, well, where does this come from? How do you know about this? And she said, well, years ago, she had these friends who lived around the corner from her in Georgetown, who were, it was the son of a woman named Evangeline Bruce. And that becomes a very important name in the story. So Carol's at this party, and they are serving the bacon that Vanjie Bruce used to serve at her own parties. And there are people in the room who know what this bacon is. And they're like, oh, you're serving the bacon. It's Vanjie's bacon. And Carol tastes it, and it's like just amazing, and she becomes addicted to it. She gets some, and she shares it with me. I can't get over how good it is. And what fascinates me, because I'm a cook, so I even tried replicating at home. I could not make this bacon. There was something about this bacon that was just, really quite not obvious how it was made. And it turns out that, this was kind of the trademark thing that Evangeline Bruce would throw at her parties. And Evangeline Bruce was famous for throwing parties. She was also the wife of a very prominent and important diplomat and former intelligence official, a guy named David K.E. Bruce.
Yeah, so I'm going to stop you right here and say, this is a story that began for you by reading the word bacon in Ben Bradley's obit, and turns into an intelligence story only after you start investigating it.
Correct.
And I just want to ask you, is that reverse engineered? Like, are you, because you're an intelligence reporter, you're going to find the intelligence angle. If you were like a music historian, would this have turned it out to be like a story about mid-century music?
No, this was straight up always a spy story, which I love. I somehow feel called to it. Like the bacon found me is what happened here.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. And like, so as I find out, like, and I was like, oh, so Vanjie Bruce served as her party. It's like, well, who are Evangeline and David K.E. Bruce? And David was, he had been the U.S. ambassador to England, to France. He was a key figure in the Marshall Plan. He and his then soon-to-be wife, Evangeline Bruce, actually met when they both worked in the OSS during World War II, which was, OSS was the Office of Strategic Services, which is the precursor to the CIA. And Vanjie had been the daughter of a diplomat and had lived all over the world and spoke multiple languages. I mean, really just an extraordinary person. And so they get together in OSS and they become this couple and they travel around the world, David being the diplomat and Vanjie being very much his partner in creating in their homes and in the embassies where they lived and these kind of things, the residences, this sort of social environment in which people came together and the work of diplomacy was conducted. And in this kind of era of, late 40s into the 50s, into the 60s, this is really the era in Washington in which people like the Bruces and other people like the Graham family who owned the Washington Post, or the Wisners, another famous family, or Joe Alsop is a name people might remember, were really the most influential, important people in the city and therefore kind of in the nation. This is often referred to as the Georgetown set. These people all lived within blocks of each other in Georgetown in DC, and they would often get together at dinner parties. This is kind of where they would all convene, this sort of, the masters of the universe, if you like. And when they would get together at these parties, and they would discuss, huge world events and like, how are we going to try and like keep the Italian government from being overthrown and all the things that you talked about over dinner. Many of the hosts and hostesses would have a trademark dish that they would serve. So like Joe Alsop, the very influential journalist, was famous for serving turtle soup, which sounds disgusting to me. Yeah, really gross.
Again, not a kosher dish among these people. I mean,
everything about this is not kosher. Totally. And I'm just fascinated by this, and and that this is a totally different world. It's inhabited by people, who were spies in the war, who then moved on to basically establish, the Western-led security order that we've like lived under for the past 80 years. I mean, these people were kind of the ones present at the creation. And I just love this idea that, they were getting together for the dinner party or the salon. They were just stopping by. I mean, the Kennedys were part of this. This is very much the Camelot era of Washington.
Yeah, and there's actually, in a film about a documentary about Ben Bradley, there's actually a discussion of these parties that, and to this day, the term Georgetown cocktail party or Georgetown dinner party, which is now used mostly disparagingly by conservatives, evokes this tradition that doesn't really exist anymore.
Yeah, and importantly, a tradition in which people of different political parties and persuasions and ideologies got together in a room and were civil to one another. And, as I would often say about this era, it is, even if you disagree with someone, it's very hard to be disagreeable when you are sitting down together for a meal. And this just doesn't happen anymore. Like, Republicans and Democrats don't get in the same room anymore. Most members of Congress don't even live in Washington, so their families are not actually here. It used to be that their kids knew each other from school and from activities, and people just ran into one another. And there was a kind of a civility about this. And I was fascinated by this era, and because Vanjie, particularly after her husband David died, continued throwing parties and really brunches, and bacon was her trademark. And many people tried to imitate this bacon. It was like what she was known for.
I love that Dick Cheney tried to imitate the bacon, but added chili.
Dick Cheney has a bacon recipe with chili. Isn't that great?
Yeah, it is great.
I love that, and actually,
now that we're rehabilitating Dick Cheney, I think it's like we should all celebrate the Vanjie Dick Cheney axis.
Totally. It's I wanted to interview him, but his people said he was not available.
I wonder why.
Yeah, wonder why. So I mean, for me, the story of the bacon became the vehicle into this bygone era of Washington, and a way for us to examine, were we better off then? Or are things working better now? Have we lost something? I mean, we should say this is a period of time too, in which the people I'm talking about in these rooms were almost exclusively white. They were overwhelmingly male. They were WASPs. It's a very particular strata of society. But people don't communicate that way anymore. And so we
Right.
have lost something from that time. We don't solve problems and hash out our differences that way anymore. And so the Bacon podcast is about that, as well as a quest to try and find the secret recipe of this bacon. Now, why it's a secret, I will say, is Evangeline Bruce, when she was serving this bacon, and we go into this in the podcast, she had a woman named Odette Pereira, who was her cook, who cooked all the food for her dinner parties, for her personally, for her all for entertaining. And Odette is the one who actually figured out how to make this bacon. Vanjie had said she tried it first in London.
At Buckingham Palace.
Well, this is where the story gets a little funny. Yeah, she says in there, like, Odette seems to remember that she said she ate it first in the Queen's house. I'm like, what? Buckingham Palace. I won't go into all this, but there may be some validity to this, which we explore in the podcast. But she basically says, Odette, I want you to replicate this amazing thing that I ate. And Odette spends a week making batch after batch after batch until she finally hits on it. And importantly, Vanjie basically swears Odette to secrecy. You can never tell anybody about this recipe. And lots of people tried to get it. Like, lots of people tried to replicate it. Like, the Bruce bacon or Vanjie's bacon was a thing that people wanted to know how to make, and no one could make it like Vanjie Bruce did, or really more like Odette did. So part of this story is trying to unlock the secret recipe to the bacon that Vanjie Bruce, who died a long time ago, swore had to stay secret, at least until after she died. And Odette Pereira, who becomes kind of the heart and soul of our story, is someone who was clinging to the recipe, let's just say, but we kind of eventually start to coax it out of her.
Yeah, so this is actually an interesting portrait of intelligence reporting.
Yeah.
You have, it actually really is. You have a source who is friendly, but who has highly classified information. You ask her, can I have the recipe? And she says, no. She refuses to give it to you. So you do what I think is very close to what you might do in a real intelligence reporting situation. You invite her over to the Washington Post cooking lab to watch you and a cooking reporter try to replicate the recipe, hoping to get little tips out of her.
Right.
So, work with me on this.
Yeah.
Is this a metaphor for how you do, I mean, in addition to how you got the bacon recipe, is this a metaphor for how you report on covert ops?
Yes. I mean, it is, because, you pointed out the sort of the starting point, which is you have a person who's not necessarily hostile to you. There may
Right.
be,
She just has swore an oath to protect classified information.
Yes. Lovely person, but she's not giving up this particular secret. And so you have to kind of both, build rapport, but also try and create the environment in which the person either feels more liberated to tell you things or can maybe tell you parts of the story.
Right.
Like, you could make the argument that Odette Pereira did not actually tell us the recipe. She did watch us make the bacon and correct us on certain things that we were doing wrong, and then kind of along the way gave enough that we figured it out. And so there's a metaphor there, I think, too, for when you're dealing with sources where they might give you snippets and someone else gives you a snippet too, and you kind of put it together. But also it's about persistence. It's about, I say this in the story that, sometimes when someone doesn't want to give you an answer, you just give them time to think about it, and you kind of back away.
In this case, 10 years.
10 years, yes. I should say, too, it's funny, the 10 years part is, when I first tried the bacon is, Carol, my friend Carol Joint, who I mentioned, had got Odette to make her a batch. And at that point, both Carol and I tried to get Odette to give up the recipe, and she wouldn't do it. And so I thought, like, one of these days I'll do a story about bacon. And I just kept occasionally I would ask people about it. And if you knew the right circles to ask and people knew exactly what you were talking about, Like it's a funny side story. I mean, like sometimes you'd explain this to people, and like most people would be like, "Wow, I've never heard of this thing at all." I also though have a friend whose grandmother was a member of the Georgetown set, and when I started explaining the story to him, he just goes, "Yeah, bacon." And he's like, "Yeah, I mean, she served it all the time in Newport." I'm like, "Of course." But I would kind of come to the story, and then like life intervened, and like there was the Trump administration, and there were wars, so I would pick the story up and then have to put it down again a lot of times. That too is very similar to what happens when you've got like just some crazy hot leader, this thing you've always wanted to try to confirm, but it's not so pressing that you can't kind of put it on the back burner and then return to it when you have time.
Right.
And that's what I did with the bacon story.
All right. I have an important bacon question, which you go into a little bit in the podcast, but I think we need to flesh out, no pun intended, a little bit here, which is, why is this bacon different from all other bacon? Candied bacon is a thing. Everybody's tasted candied bacon. It's sweet. It's got grease. It's got salty, savory thing going. We all know why it's cool. We all know why it's why it's addictive. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of intuitive. I can't imagine eating a piece of candied bacon and thinking about it for 10 years.
Yeah.
What is different about this bacon?
I think it is, I mean, if I'm talking like technically what's different about it, is the amount of sugar that it's made with. It's like if you've ever had candied bacon and you sort of you eat it and it's kind of got like a glistening kind of like coating, almost like it's been sort of swathed maybe in sugar or something, or it's got some like general sweetness, but it mostly tastes like chewy bacon. This is like, you have to imagine a piece of bacon that looks like it's been shellacked, right? It's almost as if it's like encased in some kind of resin or something. And it is cooked within an inch of being burned. Like when you make this thing, you're looking at it, you're like, this can't possibly be right. Like this looks like a culinary like mishap, that something has gone wrong. Somebody just put caramelized bacon. That's actually closer to what it is. And we go into this in the story too, like the cooking technique. I would never have hit on this.
So we're going to get to that in a minute.
Yeah. But it is, when it comes out and it is just bacon and brown sugar, that's it. It is the combination of how the bacon's been cooked and the amount of sugar that it just, you bite into it. And it's like, it is the perfect balance of salty, savory, and sweet. And when you chew it, as it's in your mouth, it's the flavor starts changing while you're chewing it. Like it starts off kind of crunchy, which then gives way into more meaty. And it's just, and like the little kind of like, the fatty bits are still there and the burn bits don't taste charred. They just taste really well cooked. It's just delicious. I mean, and it really is down to the technique of this. And, I think that too, look, I mean, for me too, there's a romanticism attached to this. It is like the bacon is, in my mind, of course, attached to something, this nostalgia for an era in which I never lived, but am fascinated by. So I think that the fact that there's a story to it, and knowing that there was a moment where, sort of all the so-and-sos in Washington would be like, in Vanjie's, ballroom eating the bacon. And if you were eating the bacon, that meant you were somebody.
You were part of the crowd that ran the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah. But it also...
All right. So I am going to leave to the show the all-important question of the trade craft. But for those who want to make the bacon, what's the essential quality of the technique? Because I was shocked when I heard what she's actually doing to make this.
So should I kind of explain how you do it?
Yeah.
So you need 2 ingredients. One, you need bacon, and you can use center cut bacon or bacon with the fat on the ends. I think it's fine, but importantly, it's not thick cut bacon. So it's not thick cut. That might make you might assume, oh, if it's really good, it must be like the expensive thick cut bacon. No, like you can use cheap bacon for this. And probably fattier bacon is better. And the other is dark brown sugar, not light, dark. And so it's those two things. And you take a sheet pan and you line it with foil. This is actually an innovation that we had. Odette doesn't line hers with foil. And when we did this, she's like, oh, that makes cleanup easier. So we actually taught Odette a trick, which was amazing. Line it with foil. And then you take a heroic amount of brown sugar. Like you're thinking you're using too much. You're probably not. And you basically line the sheet pan in a layer of brown sugar. Like imagine like...
But like how thick is the layer? Is it like
enough to just kind of like cover it? You don't have to make like inches like this, but enough to basically so you don't see foil and you can pat it down. Like imagine just like a layer, like make a reasonable layer with the sugar. And it will kind of feel like you're playing with sand. Get in there with your hands and push it into the edges and that kind of thing. And then you take the bacon and you lay it down in strips on top of that sugar. And then you take another huge amount of sugar and put that on top. Like if you've ever seen somebody cook a whole fish inside like a casing of salt, like where people will like bake a cod inside salt, it has this idea to it where you're basically encasing the bacon between two layers of sugar. And it's a lot. It's like, I mean, you could imagine probably for one batch of bacon using an entire box of brown sugar. It's a lot.
Wow, that's a lot of bacon. It's a lot of sugar.
You cover it so everything looks like it's covered in sugar. And then you take that and put it in a 300-degree oven and you cook it for a long time. And what's going to happen is the sugar will slowly start to melt and to bubble. And it'll get frothy and then it will calm down and will just kind of turn into like this hot caramel bath, almost like you're cooking it. You're cooking it in caramel is what you're doing. And the bacon will be basically submerged in it, doing just below kind of the surface. It might be still sticking up in some parts, but you then, after a half an hour, you flip it, and then you kind of keep flipping it again, maybe every 10, 15 minutes. And this is the part where you can't really write it down. You just kind of have to watch until it's ready. And it's going to take at least an hour. It's going to look... I have a picture of it on my Twitter feed or my Blue Sky feed. People can go look. But it's going to look like the color will be, and the stripes will be a variation between like mahogany color and then black. Like it's really, really cooked. And then you take it out, and this is another part that I would not have guessed. If you have a granite countertop, this works great. You lay it down on a cool surface to harden. And then when the coating sets after a few minutes, you'll be able to kind of snap it off your countertop and hold it up. And it should be like just completely like straight up. It should be just erect. It should not flop. Excuse me. That's the test. If it flops over,
right?
We cut that part out because Odette was kind of like having fun with that one. You know, it was fun. But yeah, it has to basically stand up on its own, like you could imagine, like a piece of candy, and then it's done. And then you can break it into chips, and it should kind of like snap like that when you do it. And that's, you know, that's the candy on the outside. And if you make it and you find that it's too much sugar, you think you can maybe scale back a little bit on it. But the point is that it has to be basically encased more or less. And it should be shiny and glistening. And like I said, have a shellacked quality. And it will look like it's been burned, but it will not taste that way.
Well, this is amazing. And to switch from candied bacon to cold, hard cash is painful. But Shane, in your day job, you're an intelligence reporter, not a food reporter, and we have a new FBI director nominee. Not actually technically a nominee because he's not the president yet and he can't nominate people. And by the way, if he could nominate people, there's no vacancy at the FBI yet anyway. He'd have to remove the FBI.
Details.
But Mr. Kash Patel is slated to be the new FBI director. What do you think? You excited about it? Is it great reporting opportunities for you?
I mean, look, as a journalist, I'm excited about it the same way that, like, you know, train crashes are exciting, I suppose. Look, I think Ben, I'm sure you'll agree with me. Like, if you were like making up, like, and the list with your friends of like, okay, what's like the outlandish cabinet, like the people that Trump would pick, that would, drive all of his critics nuts and make people in the national security establishment fearful and all the rest. And, Kash Patel would, as FBI director, would be on your list, or as CIA director. And this is not out of the blue. I mean, he's been both, talked about for years for positions like that. And Trump did try to install him as the deputy CIA director in his first administration. And Gina Haspel threatened to quit over it, who was then the CIA director. And he also tried to make him FBI director, or was it deputy? And Bill Barr said, over my dead body.
Deputy, yeah.
Deputy. So, like, Trump has tried this before, so it's not really surprising. I would recommend to people my colleague at The Atlantic, Elena Plott's really good profile of Kash.
Great profile.
Yeah, it was really, really good. And what she, comes up with is this portrait of a guy who, and I think he's not unique for a lot of people in Trump land, just believes that the system, and in particularly the deep state, which is to say career law enforcement and security officials, have just basically done him dirty for years. And like, he feels very aggrieved and very attacked. And I think that gives you a sense of his motivation now, which is to sort of settle scores.
He also thinks he's a wizard.
He thinks he's a wizard.
I mean, like, I just want to point out, one of the super interesting things about these books is how central to the action Kash Patel is.
Sure.
This man does not think of himself as a mid-level staffer.
No.
Right? Like, in the first book, Duke Devin petitions him, comes to Kash Patel, and I think Kash is like sitting in his office with his feet on his desk. Wait, let me check that I'm not. Yeah, look. See, Duke Devin comes to him
and kneels
and petitions him. And Wizard Kash has got his feet up on the deck. There's a serious ass role reversal going on there. But sorry, you were saying.
No, I think that, look, I mean, it's funny. I was, Robert O'Brien, who was Trump's national security advisor, actually wrote a op-ed for the Wall Street Journal yesterday saying all the reasons he thought that Kash was a great pick. And, I won't go into all the reasons that people like think he is a good pick. I mean, he's obviously untraditional, but like, let's be very clear. There's a reason he's being put there, and it's to be an instrument of Trump's political vendettas. And this, Kash Patel is going to face, if he actually gets to a nomination, which I kind of doubt he will. We can talk about that maybe. He will get the same question that all of these people, Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth, John Ratcliffe, will all get, which is your loyalty to the agency you represent and to the rule of law, or is it to Donald Trump? I think it's pretty unambiguous that Kash Patel's loyalty is to Donald Trump. They're going to have to answer for, okay, and how would you then be a credible leader of this awesomely powerful institution? Look, speaking as a journalist, I mean, I kind of like joke about like, it's great to cover. He's scary. I mean, he has openly said that he wants to prosecute journalists for doing our jobs. I am not at all comfortable with the idea of an FBI director who, along with the attorney general, can basically decide what they want the policy to be in terms of subpoenaing my records, coming after my notes, trying to find my sources. They can be as restrained or as not as they want to be. And I've said this to you before too. There's nothing in the Espionage Act that prohibits prosecuting a journalist for publishing classified information. It's just the custom of the government only to prosecute people who have security clearances and disclose classified information. I don't have a clearance. I expect that custom will change or be, up for debate in a Kash Patel FBI. And this really goes, I think, more, I'll just say the last thing too, Ben, things that you write about, far more eloquently than I do. But, there is not a vacancy at the FBI right now. Chris Wray will either have to be fired or quit. Trump fired Jim Comey. Obviously, that's how Chris Wray got his current job. The era of an independent FBI director who serves a 10-year term or is presumed it's over. It's done. And so there is no more expectation that an FBI director will have that kind of independence from politics. And there, you could, I suppose, make the argument like, well, the CIA director is also changes with the administration. So does the National Security Advisor, et cetera. But the standard has always been for these positions is that these are people who will serve in apolitical manners, right? That they may not always live up to that, and there are notable exceptions, but that is the standard, that is the goal. And for people like Kash Patel, that is absolutely not the goal.
Although, one thing that is interesting is that in the partisan sense, FBI directors generally have lived up to it. So even J. Edgar Hoover, who was a super bad guy in a lot of respects, he was not a particular political partisan. He was ferociously and anti-communist, and he had a thing against the left, and he was a racist.
Yeah.
But he was not, his closest presidential partners were actually Democrats, Franklin Roosevelt and Lyndon Johnson in particular. And so, I think the tradition of presidents coming in and putting in their own FBI directors to go after their enemies is non-existent in the history of the FBI. And I think it's something we need to really think about.
Yeah, and it's something else it's been on my mind in a more particular kind of way because I've been working on this Ratcliffe profile. And you alluded to Cash's first book in the trilogy with the the mention of the Steele dossier. I suppose he calls it something else, but that there's this kind of kernel of truth to it, and that yes, the document was flawed, and it's been proven to be I think quite considerably flawed over time. We have to remember, like, the central vexating role that the Russia probe plays in the lives of people like Kash Patel, like John Ratcliffe, like Donald Trump, and others. And within that universe, the centrality of the Steele dossier.
Right.
Like, there is an alternate...
Well, within their perception of that unit. Because, in fact, the Steele dossier is... not trivial, but it's one corner of the Russia investigation.
Right.
It's a corner
for it.
It's a corner. It is not how the Russia investigation began, and it's not the part of it, because it was so much of it was garbage, as it turned out. It's not the part of the Russia investigation that actually produced any fruit, a la the Manafort stuff, or the Trump Tower meeting, or the stuff that you broke involving that weirdo Peter Smith, right? Yeah. It was not like, it's a part that wasted a huge amount of FBI time, because they tried to run down every single allegation in it, because that's what the FBI does.
Right. And I think that it's worth remembering that people of this persuasion do think that the Steele dossier is somehow regarded by the FBI as the text of the Russia investigation, because to them, this is the source of the corruption that has then pervaded the FBI and the intelligence community that now needs to be remedied. Right. So, like, when we talk about, like, their war against the deep state, it's not just because they don't like bureaucracies. They're specifically going back to a chapter in history from which they see all of this kind of evil sprouting, and it's gone in new directions too. But yeah, this is the plot against the king, right?
Right. And then it leads to the plot against the king, where they set a dragon named DOJ against the king. But the king tames the dragon and turns it against his foes.
Right. And that is, I think that you can read, honest to God, I think you can read these books as a roadmap for what Kash Patel would like to do with the FBI. Like, and this is always the thing with people in Trump land, right? They're telling you what they're going to do, right? It's never like, I mean, I was, off in Europe a week and a half ago talking to officials there, and they're saying, well, do you think Trump's playing like some kind of 4-dimensional chess, and like, hey, Matt Gaetz would be the heat shield, so Tulsi Gabbard can get, no.
Right.
No,
It's never
this is what he
4-dimensional
wants. He's
chess.
telling you what he's going to do. It's like the New Yorker cartoon with the wolf in the sheep's clothing running for office, and it says, "I'm going to eat you."
And the sheep say, "He tells it like it is."
Right. Exactly.
So Shane, I spent yesterday reading these 3 books, and
God bless you.
and I wrote my column on them yesterday. And for those who are interested in the contents of the books, one of which we're going to read, I think we're going to leave it up to Shane which one we read. But to me, the weirdest thing about these books is the fact that they exist at all. So the content is really weird. But the first thing that strikes me as like faintly psychopathic about these books. So you will notice that here it says children ages 3 and up. So like that Kash Patel seems to earnestly want parents to teach their 3-year-olds about the Steele dossier, about the stolen 2020 election, and about the weaponization of the DOJ. The latter 2 events of which are, of course, entirely false. And there's something that seems almost quite deranged, even if you believe those things, about wanting to create an environment in which parents are teaching toddlers about them. I don't know what to say about that other than to observe that it appears to be the ambition of the books. And I gotta say, I'm anxious about having an FBI director who wants parents to teach their children at this age. We're not talking about high school students or civics, right? Bad enough that you would want to teach high school students in civics class false information, but like start the programming at children ages 3 and up. Start them in indoctrination of false information about recent American history. There's something psychotic about that.
And I want to know, like, I mean, I would really love to know, because publishers can track these things. How many copies of this book has he sold? Because, like, really, like, where in America are the parents, like, lying down with their children in bed at night and reading them about the dragon of jalapenos to lull them to sleep? I'm sure it's happening, but I think, to your point, it's more that is his ambition that is problematic.
Yeah,
I hope these 3 books are entered into the record at the Senate Judiciary hearing.
So I don't know. Because I was interested in the content of the books, not the circumstances around the books. I haven't looked at things like what their Amazon ratings are.
We could look.
I did notice that the 3rd book, at least, does not seem to have very good Amazon reviews. So among people,
oh no, it doesn't. I'm looking right now. Oh yeah, they don't like this.
Which
it only has 19 reviews.
I thought it was the most interesting of the books, to be honest, but I am admittedly an unusual reader. So Shane, we have 10 minutes left. We have time to read one of the books. Which ones should we read?
Wow, you can read it in 10 minutes? Okay. We're not going to read number 2.
They're not long. We're not going to read number 2.
For that. We're not going to read number 2 because, that's all. That's just fever dream stuff. It's all kind of fever dream. But so the question really is, like, I'm more familiar with The Plot Against the King. I've not read either. I would like to pick whichever one you think is the most instructive on what we can expect to happen
Well, that I think is number 3 because
probably number
3 actually deals with intentions a little bit.
Let's do that, because
All
number
right.
1, we're just going down the rabbit hole of the bizarre theory of the origins of the Russia probe, and
All right, so I'm going to make myself large here so that I have time to. Whoops. Wait a minute. But now. There we go. All right, children. The Plot Against the King 3.
Yay!
The Return of the King. Notice that
already this is a copyright violation.
Notice that the DOJ here is the Dragon of Jalapenos.
Why not jicama? Sorry.
We're gonna get to like why that's weird in a little while. The land of the free, that's the name of the mythical land, was in terrible shape, and all hope seemed lost as the self-proclaimed Baron von Biden's carriage passed through the village streets. Note the Germanic, it's not Van Biden, it's von, right? German.
Von Biden.
Von Biden. Windows were smashed out, houses were empty, and frogs were everywhere. There is no explanation anywhere of the frogs, by the way.
The frogs are a symbol for plague, someone says.
Yeah. Where are all my loyal subjects? The Baron asked. Choosing day is coming up. Don't they want to vote for me? They have all moved away, said assistant to the Baron Kamalala. No one can afford to live in the village anymore, and the people want King Donald back anyway.
Oh, wow.
Says who? Asked the Baron. The pole troll, replied Kamalala as she pointed to a large troll with a rather long scroll. The troll blinked his beady eyes and sniffed. Yes, it's true. 3 out of 4 villagers say they will choose King Donald over you on choosing day. Oh, sugar and biscuits, said the Baron before promptly falling asleep.
Sugar and biscuits?
Sugar and biscuits.
I'm going to use that. That's good.
Kamalala looked from the sleeping Baron to Shifty the Jester. Now, I will just note that Shifty the Jester in the first book is a knight named a shifty-looking knight who appears to be Adam Schiff, but he's somehow morphed into a jester.
Well, he does have a new job now, so...
It's true, although this was published before his election to the greatest jestery body of all time.
Yeah, that was a sure thing, so...
King Donald may have foiled our Russionia schemes, but he won't foil us this time. Shifty, make sure that those ungrateful villagers never choose King Donald again. You know what you must do. Commence Baron von Biden's backup plan. Bring in the DOJ.
Oh, dear.
Shifty rushed to the back of the castle where he came upon Baron von Biden's favorite pet, the DOJ, also known as the Dragon of Jalapenos. Shifty smiled as he looked at the tiny sleeping dragon. Poor little guy. Did you get chained up for biting a knight again? Get it? Biden's pet bites people.
Yep.
Don't worry, I have a treat for you, my precious.
Precious. What? Oh, come on. He did not say my precious.
Anytime you think I'm making it up, I'm never making it up.
I'm sorry.
Shifty rushed to the back of the castle where he came across Baron von Biden's favorite pet, the DOJ, also known as the Dragon of Jalapenos. Shifty smiled as he looked at the tiny sleeping dragon. Poor little guy. Did you get... Oh, I'm sorry. I already read that.
I've heard this.
Yeah, the dragon yawned and sniffed the air. Here you go. These will make you big and strong. And Shifty laughed as he pulled some spicy magic peppers out of a bag.
Ooh.
With that, the DOJ gobbled them all up. And then, right before...
So like disinformation, I wonder?
I don't know. He gave them to, I guess. It causes the dragon to. The disinformation is in the next page, actually.
I see. So the peppers are like what makes him the special counsel.
I guess, yeah. Then, right before Shifty's eyes, the dragon grew and grew and grew until he was bigger than a house.
Mm.
With a roar, the dragon broke free of his chains and turned toward Shifty. "No, I am not a snack," yelled Shifty, "but King Donald is. Get him and all his buddies. They hate dragons. Look at this photo."
Oh.
Shifty trembled as the dragon's eyes narrowed. His hot breath blew in Shifty's face until the dragon grabbed a hold of the photo and took off with a terrible roar. Now notice that the photo is a fake because there's taped images on top of the faces of the so that's the disinformation, the lies that are being perpetrated.
Oh, I see.
King Donald whistled as he strolled through the village. He had just returned from a tremendous round of golf. When he, like seems to be said unironically.
Yes, tremendous.
When he was shocked to find his house in flames. Get it? House in flames. He couldn't believe his eyes. Who had done this? Look. King Donald left a candle too close to the curtain. How irresponsible. He should never be king again, yelled the heralds. We can't allow him.
The candle was also classified. Sorry.
Yes, the candle was classified. We can't allow him to be chosen on choosing day. Also, ignore the giant dragon in the background. King Donald turned in surprise as the dragon of jalapenos chased him, lighting abandoned homes on fire with his flaming breath and singeing Donald's ear. Get it? Singeing his ear. This was published in September, so after the assassination attempt. Notice that he appears to be suggesting that DOJ was behind the assassination.
Of course,
attempt.
I did pick up on that.
Yeah, just
subtle,
checking.
I
it's subtle. Mm-hmm. King Donald wasn't afraid, but he had to put a stop to this before everything went up in flames. And here you can see the flames touching his ear.
Oh, licking it.
Yeah. Quickly, he ran through the streets, leading the dragon away until he came to the home of Kash the Wizard. Okay, now I want to point out here that in the first book, Devin Nunes is the supplicant to Kash Patel. In this book, he goes whole hog. Donald Trump comes to him begging for help. King Donald pounded on the door. "Open up, O great and powerful Kash." "Who is it?" said a voice. "I don't need any magazines or cookies." So Kash is like clearly the guy in charge here.
No soliciting. Go away.
No soliciting. But before King Donald could reply, the dragon snatched him up in his claws. Now, I want you to pay particular attention to this part because this is where they use violence against the Justice Department.
Okay.
"Choosing days canceled. I'm going to eat you up," roared the dragon. "You will never be king again, dragon hater." "What are you talking about?" asked King Donald. "I don't hate dragons. I love cops, right? I want them to beat people up and not hold people's heads when they put them in the car." Yeah. "This proves otherwise," roared the dragon as he held out the photo. "You can't fool me."
Oh.
Everything seemed hopeless. King Donald was about to become a king-sized snack until suddenly the dragon squealed out in pain as Kash stomped on his foot and screamed, "You shall not pass."
This is the third blatant ripping off of Tolkien.
Seeing his opportunity, King Donald grabbed hold of the photo, kicked the dragon in the chest, and did a double backflip before dropping to the ground.
A double backflip? Because he's really dexterous and acrobatic.
Yes, exactly.
Very
You'll
fit.
pay for that, the dragon growled as he turned toward Kash. "No, he won't," King Donald said as he stepped forward in front of his friend, held up the photo, and ripped off the tape. "Lies! Total fake news! Baron and his cronies taped our heads to the bodies. No way I'm that scrawny. Everybody knows it."
Everybody knows it.
Everybody knows it. Yeah, that's a good line. Realizing he had made a terrible mistake, The dragon looked down in disbelief as big tears dropped to the ground. How is it possible? It's like the scales are lifted from my eyes. No pun intended. The no pun intended is actually there.
Oh, I believe you. I got that. Yeah.
It's all right, declared King Donald. We all make mistakes and sometimes believe things that are untrue. But now we have more important things to deal with. Let's get this kingdom back in order before choosing day. With the dragon's help, King Donald and Kash cleaned up the streets and shed light on Baron von Biden's evil plot against King Donald as the villagers returned to their homes. The kingdom was back in order, and the last thing anyone saw of Baron von Biden, Kamalala, Shifty, and all the rest of their comrades was their behinds as the dragon of jalapenos chased them out of the kingdom, never to be seen again. And when Baron von Biden and Kamalala's lies finally exposed, all the villagers gave 3 cheers for King Donald as they lifted him onto their shoulders, thankful to know the truth, and now full of hope. Everyone in the land lined up for choosing day, excited to choose their new king.
Wow.
There you go.
Well, you know, I, for one, feel like I've been enlightened.
We started with bacon. We ended up with weaponizing the DOJ. I just want to point out, for those of you who haven't, truly processed this, the author of that book is slated to be the director of the FBI. And we're just going to leave it there. Shane Harris, you're a great American. It's a fabulous story. And everybody needs to listen to it. It's there on Washington Post Reports. And Shane, tell your New Atlantic colleagues what fun Dogshirt TV is.
Oh, I will. I have no doubt that, especially if you're going to read more children's books, we have story hour.
Children's books every day. Folks, we will be back on Monday. I have no idea if we'll have a guest. I have no idea who the guest will be. I have no idea if I'll have any co-hosts or who they'll be, but I'll be here, as I'm sure will you.
Bye-bye.